We'll now move on to the sixth item on our agenda, which is everyone's favorite. Number 6, review of income tax credits, alternative renewable fuels, with Representative Peterson. Representative Peterson, the floor is yours. Are you plugging in the computer to make a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. The only thing more fun than hanging out with CPAs is PowerPoint.
So this is the second time we've come to this committee or come to Rev and Tax to discuss this situation. You may remember during the 2016 session, we brought this to the House Standing Committee just to get the conversation started to discuss the growth, the exponential growth in the tax credit for rooftop solar power systems. Just to give you some basic background, the credit has operated basically in its current form since 2002, provides for a $2,000 tax credit to the purchaser of a rooftop solar power system, or 25% of the cost of the system, whichever is less. There's currently no limits or caps associated with the credit on the state side of things, and because it is a tax credit, it directly impacts funds that come to the education fund. So the problem, well, this isn't necessarily a problem chart. This is, if you're in the solar business, this is a great chart. What this does is show you the adoption of net metering agreements. This information comes from Rocky Mountain Power. Individuals that qualify for a rooftop solar power system tax credit need to have a net metering agreement in place. So this is a very close approximation of what the usage is. And so we see that, well, up until about 2012, the credit kind of bumbled along. The number of customers adopting rooftop solar power systems was growing, arithmetically at best. And then something changed in 2012, and we began this very geometric rise in the use of these systems. So, keeping in mind that with each one of these installations, there's a $2,000 credit associated with that. We translate that into impact on the budget, and we change our chart here. You can see that for 2016, we're already at a little over $16 million impact. 2012, we rewind the clock, we're about a $1 million impact. So this is a pretty remarkable chart. The market forces at play right now don't seem to indicate that there's going to be much change in the direction of this chart. So the question is, why is this happening? The growth in solar is led by falling prices. That's market dynamics. Prices decrease, demand increases, and you can see the green line there shows you the cost per watt on a system from about $7.50 back in 2009 to a little over $2 today. So that dramatic decrease obviously has spurred growth in the industry, and obviously with our state tax credits, that has helped goose those numbers up. Okay, so keeping in mind that 2016 is not over yet, and these numbers that I've received are a little dated, we expect that the impact to the state education fund will be about $20 million for this year. And if the doubling and tripling trend were to continue into successive years, 2017, if we were to project, it could be a $40 to $60 million impact to education funds next year. So what can you buy with $20 million? It's nearly a 1% increase in the WPU. You could purchase 400 teachers, $5 to anyone who can name the scene from this film. All right. Or you could buy 66 million crayons with $20 million. So, some philosophical questions. When does an incentive become a subsidy? And I guess that just kind of depends on who you're asking and what their proclivities are. Does Utah want to be in the subsidy business? If so, to what degree do we want to be in the business? How does that look? And if we don't, how do we scale back or wind down Utah's programs or positions that we're in right now? So kind of sticky questions. So before you have a bill proposal. The bill proposal has several goals. One is to contain the budgetary impact that the tax credit is making to the education fund. We want to put a fence around it. We want to contain the bleeding. We want to promote independence of the industry, right? The industry was given some training wheels, so to speak, with the tax credit to kind of prop it up. And it seems to have immediately taken off suddenly and unexpectedly. So it seems that it's time to pull those training wheels off and let the industry run under its own strength. And then thirdly, we want to minimize, because we as a state have created this distortion to begin with, we want to be able to minimize the impact of market shocks with what we do. So first, to contain the impact, the bill has a provision to create a moratorium when the governor signs the bill into action or signs it into law. At that point, based on current trends, we expect that if he were to sign the bill sometime in the spring of 2017, it'd be a $20 to $30 million impact to the education fund at that time already. So that's something we just have to live with. After that, in 2018, the bill creates a cap and says that we will allot $4 million to tax credits for purchasers of rooftop systems. This is kind of similar to some of the programs GOED has, where GOED is given a license to issue credits for a certain dollar amount. So we would just create a budget, so to speak, of what we're allowing to go to this tax credit, and that would be implemented in 2018. In 2019, that tax credit would be reduced $1 million, and the credit would be phased out over a 4-year period ending at the end of 2021. Also, to maintain the number of customers that can take advantage of this tax credit with the cap being reduced, we also propose a reduction in the dollar value of the tax credit. So 2017, it would be like it is 2000, and each successive year it would reduce $500 until 2021. We have a $250 credit, and then the program would wind down at that point. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Very informative. Okay, Representative Polson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious. I'm always curious about the genesis or the history of these bills, because essentially, couldn't we do a PowerPoint presentation on every tax credit we do and that impact on the education fund? And we just had a presentation about a lot of those, and so I'm just curious why. What is the genesis of this? Why you've chosen this particular industry to focus on rather than the many other tax credits that we do?
That's actually a good question. So when I first started looking at this issue about 2 years ago, I just opened the lid to our existing tax credits, recognizing that education funds were being impacted by these things. And that's one of the reasons that we passed during the last special session the tax credit review amendments, so we can have the tax credit reviews come to this committee, and then we can see what's happening with each one of those credits. A couple years ago, I did the research on the size of the existing tax credits, what they were doing. So one of the biggest tax credits we have is a credit for taxes already paid, right? So we don't tax people twice. There's also a tax credit that we have for folks who are in retirement. It's a pretty significant one. This credit is quickly becoming number 3 or 4 on the list in the size of tax credits, and it's going to grow. It's going to continue to grow because the industry is maturing. Most of the tax credits we have are ticky-tacky in proportion to size. So this one receives a lot of attention because it's growing quickly and it's big. And that's why the focus is on it.
And just out, is there a federal tax credit for?
There is also a
for this?
30% tax credit that exists, and that will be in place for another 5 years or so.
Okay, I'm just curious too, if this is 3 or 4 on the list, what was 1, 2, and 3?
Well, 1 and 2 would be the retirement tax credit and tax credit for taxes already paid.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Polson. Senator Stevenson.
Thank you. Just a quick question. If the PSC approves Rocky Mountain Power's request for changing the net metering, won't that make this moot?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question because our decision here today may inform their decision, or we could let their potential decision inform our decision. So, to me, that this is an open discussion, and since we're first in line, I would say that we should act, according to what we think is best, and then let them deal with what we do.
Well, I agree with Senator DeBackis' previous comments about taking money from school children. $20 million is a lot of money, yeah. And therefore I agree with Senator DeBackis.
Do you hear that, Mr. Bagley? Somewhere, let's
that's
put a
on the
cartoon
record.
on that.
That's
for
actually
sure.
on the record. Yeah.
With that, his twin brother, Senator DeBackis.
Thank you. I think I can answer your question, Senator Stevenson. The nascent rooftop Utah solar industry will be dead, as Nevada's is now dead, if the Public Service Commission decides to interpret it the way the Rocky Mountain Power wants it interpreted. It'll be over. So this will be a moot issue because, you know what? Nobody's gonna be there because it doesn't make financial sense. So we may not even need to pass this. And as I saw that great spike in solar use in the state, I guess I didn't think, what a terrible nightmare. And just one other point I want to make, just for the record, because when we spoke with the Tax Review Commission chairman, he did not have a figure on what the 3-year economic life for the sales tax exemption would be. Staff has subsequently given me that.
Senator.
Yes.
Let's keep this
Okay.
germane to this bill and this issue.
Well,
I know that you want to get into another issue, but I'm either going to gavel you and turn off your light, or I'm going to ask that you stay on the bill.
Mr. Chair, on the bill, part of the presentation was what we would do with that $20 million.
Let's not make comparisons to other policies or bills, Senator.
All right.
Thank you.
So, as you talk about the loss of revenue, it is. I would argue that $20 million is a significant amount of money, but we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for others here.
Yeah.
And I just find it difficult that $20 million would be targeted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Briscoe.
Other people had their lights pressed first. You're being nice to me. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
It's the last time. Don't tell anyone else.
He was always nice to me. Representative Peterson, thank you for pulling this information together. The fact that something that many people want to enhance has an impact on public school funding is a challenge. I do echo the remarks of my esteemed colleague sitting right next to me. There are other taxes that we could also throw up on the screen that have a negative impact on public education, and Democrats have presented to the body of the House Representatives options which were not supported, which would have increased the weighted pupil unit by 1% each in each of the past 2 years. Here's my struggle. I think this is worthy of looking at, but I think we're looking at it in isolation and we're narrowing in the scope. And I'm thinking about oil and gas, the subsidies we provide for oil and gas. There have been national studies that have shown in the history of, back when we were starting oil production at cost in pollution and adjusted inflation dollars, $500 to get a barrel of oil out of the ground. It made sense. to incent the production of oil back in the late 1800s when we were killing every well that was known to man to try and get something that wasn't stinky to light our buildings with. Oil was a great gift to us and the ability to get it out of the ground. Over time, for every dollar that we've given to renewables, the federal government has provided $74 in subsidies to oil and gas. And these are permanent. And I talk intangible drilling costs. Some of these are federal tangible drilling costs, active passive income, lease costs. There's a plethora of investment ability, of write-offs and tax favored exemptions that help people pull oil and gas out of the ground and subsidize it so we're not paying the full production costs. We're not even talking externalities. We're not even talking the costs that air pollution produced by the burning of these fuels costs people in terms of health effects. So let's look at them all instead of picking one, is my point. Thank you.
And if I could just respond to that, Mr. Chair. I sympathize with the representative's feelings. We do need to take an equal look at these incentives and see what if there's thumbs tipping the scale either direction. I believe in a free market and things should stand on their own legs, economically speaking. The main rub coming from the tax credit side of things is that this is an education funding problem. If this was an appropriation from the general fund, a direct appropriation as a grant or whatnot to consumers for that, I don't know that we would be having this discussion today. But because it comes directly from education, that's been the main problem.
Thank you. Senator Bramble.
Thank you. I had two questions, one for Senator Stevenson, one for Representative Briscoe. The intersection of the net metering action by the Public Service Commission and this credit, I'm not sure that many folks understand what Senator Stevenson was referring to. And for Representative Briscoe, I'd like to know what those state-based oil and gas incentives are, just kind of a description, because I happen to practice in the oil and gas arena, and I'm not aware of what he's referring to.
Your mic is on.
Oh, me first? As I understand it, the PSC is now considering a proposal to change the net metering from what has been in place, where when you generate power from your rooftop, you get to sell it onto the grid at the full retail price that you purchased. So it doesn't include any of the costs of delivery and all of the embedded costs of having to run a utility. So you basically get full benefit of the fully loaded price as opposed to the generation cost. And this proposal the PSC is looking at would bring that down to the generation cost or generation value of the electricity rather than all of the embedded costs of delivering it and all of that. And I didn't realize that you could actually get paid more than anybody else who's generating electricity gets paid per kilowatt by having a rooftop, and it seems to be an unearned benefit. And if you're going to be generating power, you ought to get it at the going rate of the wholesale power rather than the delivered power. And that is thought to be something that will reduce new rooftops because you can't make it pencil anymore.
Thank you. Representative Briscoe.
Senator Bramble's offered to debate me. That could be kind of fun. Many of these subsidies for oil and gas are federal. However, there is a study out that suggested that the health costs and the externality costs and the negative effects of coal-fired electricity amounted to $40 per megawatt hour. So if they were paying that full freight that would change a lot of these, that would make a lot of alternative renewable energy sources look even more favorable from an economic point of view, as well as a health.
Mr. Chair, specifically, the tax incentive benefits for oil and gas that would be germane to this discussion is what I was referring to. I've had this discussion with folks at the federal level as well, and generally what they're talking about are things like depreciation, the fact that you can write off labor and all the other normal, ordinary, necessary business expenses, and somehow we call those special deductions for a particular industry. And so I think it would be appropriate at some point to have that debate, because I think there are people in this room that have some expertise in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bramble. Okay, with that, that now concludes the committee questions and clarifications. We're now going to hear from public comment. Please raise your hand if you're here to speak on this bill. Okay, fantastic. If you'd both come forward, we'll hear from both of you. Please make sure you introduce yourself, give your name and social security number.
And your PIN.
And sign in, so thank you. But sign in after or as one of you is speaking, please.
No, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is that on?
Hold the microphone really close to you. Unfortunately, in this room, you have to be really close.
Good morning. Still not?
Hit the red button.
Thank you, Representative. Good morning. My name is Ryan Evans. I am the president of the Utah Solar Energy Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. I think I heard earlier from Senator Stevenson how we tend to talk about the costs, and it's nice to see the benefits and/or the ROI on some of these tax credits. And I think that's an important part of this discussion. And by the end of my comments, I would like also to just comment briefly on the Rocky Mountain Power proposal as well, simply because of the industry impact it will have. So first and foremost, when we did an economic analysis of this tax credit, Utah Clean Energy actually ran this via a stakeholder process that was done with the Office of Energy Development. And we found that for every $20 million in state funding of this individual tax credit, not corporate tax credit, it generated about $313 million in total economic impact. So quite a bit is actually coming back to the community. For every $2,000 that goes to a resident in the state of Utah when they put solar on their home, roughly, because all system sizes are different, roughly anywhere between $800 to $1,000 will come back via sales and use tax. As well, we had the National Solar Association help us with some modeling on income tax, and they were able to predict that probably $350 because of this growth comes back in individual income tax. I don't have a number on corporate income tax and how that comes back to the overall budget as well. We're working on that. We've actually asked a couple different groups to look at some significant modeling when it comes to the solar industry and its impact on the Utah economy. But all in all, it would be my prediction that we either get that $2,000 back as a state or it comes close. It's just different buckets. It's not necessarily going back to that education fund. But I do recognize the impact there. Equally so, this has also spurred the solar industry to be the fastest growing job industry in the state right now. The industry is growing at 24% year over year. So that's a significant increase for wages in this state, opportunities in this state, et cetera. We also are blessed in part because of this tax credit, but more because of the overall environment for the solar industry here to have two headquarters in Utah that represent significant amount of jobs in our state and will continue to grow those states in partnership with the Office of Economic Development. And that is Vivint Solar, who has a national headquarters here, and Solar City, who has a regional headquarters here. They are the largest, and I believe Vivint is the third largest solar installer in the nation for residential solar. We did a poll to see how important this was. I actually had discussed that poll with Representative Peterson ahead of time. I wanted his input. I think we came to a reasonable way to ask the question. And I understand polls are, they're a little ambiguous. They are what they are. But I thought it would help to find out why, how important is this tax credit? Is it still something that people need, or is it just propping up an industry, so to speak? And we found that 83% of 485 respondents actually said it was either important or very important. to their decision to put solar on their rooftop. 50% flat across the board said it was very important in their decision. They would not have installed solar without the assistance of the state to do so. The reasons they do it, number one is to save money on their utility bills. 2 and 3 are equally tied for environmental impact, as well as wanting to feel a level of energy independence. That was strongly stated. So I believe this tax credit is unlike most in that it recovers most of its taxes, or it recovers most of the credit back to the state even before it is taken via the sales and use. It supports significant activity in our state, and discontinuing it or capping it, especially on the cap side, would be a significant challenge to an industry to adjust, growing industry at this point, to adjust to a cap, much less a scaling down over time. All of our indications from prior to even the Rocky Mountain Power filing with the Public Service Commission did not show that this industry would continue to double. It showed a definite tapering. It did not show that it would slow down completely, but it did show down that 2017 would not have significant increase over 2016 growth. I think relevant to this conversation is a discussion that was had in the Public Utilities, Technology and Energy Committee last month. They asked a Dr. Yonk to speak, a professor from USU, who really laid out the fact that there are incentives for basically all sources of energy, whether state or national. That can be discussed, of course. But his most important point was, when you introduce an incentive, you are impacting a market. You are, as a body, saying this is something that we are willing to do. We will impact the free market. But the other important part he made was, as you pull away a credit or an incentive, you are impacting a market, and it should be done carefully and thoughtfully. So I think that's important to note. A common misunderstanding we found, too, is income levels. I think it's very misunderstood that this is the wealthier of Utahns that are taking this. We are actually trying to pull that data, but the first 2 solar firms that have their own internal financing companies sent some information that would actually reflect that the majority of households that take this are around the $80,000 income level and lower. Believe it or not, there are plenty within the $50,000 to $70,000 income level that are taking this tax credit. And then I think lastly, I would just like to briefly comment on the Rocky Mountain Power, because Senator Stevens brought it up. That effect is actually already being taken. So there is a discussion of whether or not it should be sold back at a generation rate, but there's also in this conversation with their proposal, and perhaps Sophie would actually speak to it a little bit more to my right, but there is a increased hookup fee, if you will. There are significant fees in this that would actually likely double the lifetime payback of a solar investment. And because that is looming within just a few months, we've actually already seen a slowdown in activity in the solar industry. We've already seen some people quit, and people are considering layoffs in this industry. So I think it's actually much bigger. It is something that should be decided at the Public Service Commission. What is that value of solar? Because there is value in consuming energy where it is generated. There is an impact to resiliency on the grid. But these are discussions that are much bigger than today. But just know that that impact will, because that filing has already been in place, whether or not it's been improved, it has actually already served to slow down the solar industry tremendously. And in my opinion, if we added this on top of that, I think it is relevant to discuss it, because I think if we added this on top of that decision, even though they are separate bodies, it would see an incredible loss of jobs in the state. So thank you.
Okay, great. There were a couple questions. There's a question for you here on the committee, so hang on just a second, Mr. Evans.
Sure.
Representative Notwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions for Mr. Evans, if I might. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your testimony. Do you, on your survey, did you specifically call out the state credit or all tax credits?
On that particular survey that we, again, received about 485 responses, it was solely for the state tax credit. It did not have to do with the federal income tax credit.
Okay. The only reason I ask is the state credit, in my estimation, having had it estimated for my own home, was paltry in comparison to the federal one.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely. The typical would be that it would be about another year that you could take off of that payback time. So it can be significant for families, and most did take that maximum credit.
Okay. Out of curiosity, at what point do you consider the market mature to where you don't need government incentives
It's a great question. I think it's one that should be discussed in length. I don't know the answer to that, let's put it that way, but I think it's something that should be studied. When we actually, in that last month's Public Utility, Energy, and Technology Committee, I think the committee itself had a robust discussion on what are the ROIs on incentives. So even if it should be phased out, when should it be phased out based upon the return on investment for the state of Utah? And in my opinion, it is a shame that most tax credits don't have this reporting, and so I was very glad to see that this is coming to be much more of a substantial process for the state to actually see what they get back for it.
So without the credit, do you know if there's an ROI to the consumer without the state tax credit?
Yes, eventually there would be. It just helps to make this a more palatable decision. I think it's a state investment in cleaner energy, cleaner air quality. We find that people that have solar on their homes are more likely to have an electric vehicle, and if battery prices keep coming down the way battery prices seem to be falling with PV prices, we could see a system where we have residential rooftop solar coupled with a battery fueling electric vehicles that could have dramatic impact on area source emissions for air quality.
So my last question for you is, the good representative from Weber County brought this forward during the session this year, and he sort of said, you know what, we need to work through this through the summer. He said that he had agreement from the industry that they would work. So my curiosity is, how many times have you met with him to discuss this issue, and kind of broadly, how many proposals did you bring forward? You know, what kind of dialogue happened about this?
So the Office of Energy Development held 3 stakeholder meetings at their offices. They invited members of the economic development community, energy community, solar energies particularly, as well as the representative in mind, Representative Peterson. And I felt like we had 2 very good discussions on that issue. We did have a third discussion where not all parties were present, but we, as a solar industry, along with OED, threw out potential options for change, but we were not able to get that far because of that change. And when the bill was originally drafted, it was very close to that first September interim meeting when we expected to see this bill. So we were on a timeline at that point, and since that timeline, we've actually been addressing various communities as well that are looking at their net metering agreements too. So a few conversations here and there. I've had several members of the industry reach out, but I would actually really welcome those, because I think there is a better way to do this especially with a $4 million cap. I think that part is extremely challenging us to set it so low. That's the hardest part, to adjust the entire market within a year, even though, you know, who knows what's going to happen over the next year.
Mr. Chair, I would just say I'm really shocked that 9 months ago we had a proposal to eliminate this credit, and we have a rep that's saying, hey, let's meet and let's work it out. And in 9 months we've had 3 meetings to talk about something that potentially could be the death knell of their industry. I'm flatly shocked that that's all that happened. I think that's a little disappointing. So thanks for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Another question, Ryan, from Representative Ellison. Oh, sorry. Looks like Representative Ellison is taking the form of Representative Hutchings today.
So normally, when we do incentives, is to help an industry get going, is to build infrastructure. We've been talking about it with electric vehicles, with hydrogen, with all kinds of stuff like that. It's an industry, and it's a classic growth curve, right? And so my question may be just a teensy bit redundant, but the things that you mentioned about the reasons why people install, completely agree with that. I think the environmental one is a huge driver. I think trying to have a little independence is a big driver. Clean air, I think, is a big driver. But I was just looking as you were talking about cost of solar over time, and even just based off of that chart right there. So when we started doing, so if you go back to 2002, cost per watt has dropped pretty dramatically. So the ability for somebody to get in to be able to get their home set up, it seems like the industry, seems like technology has caught up to the point where our incentive makes a statement, but it's not necessarily a financial driver anymore. And I'll tell you, and so I guess maybe to both of you, my big concern on this is I don't want people to think that the state of Utah doesn't either embrace or want or need desperately solar. And good grief, if we can get homes to charge cars that can then drive without, emissions, we don't even have the long tailpipe issue at that point. It's a big, big deal. It's a big deal. But based on these numbers, and a quick Google search and it's all over the place. It's 1/5 per watt what it was back in 2001, 2002.
Correct.
So that type of an incentive, while a good statement, doesn't necessarily carry the same kind of impact. I guess it has a dramatically greater impact, but it's much easier, I think, for the individual now to get into a solar system than it was 10, 15 years ago. So the need for the incentive, and you said if you're stepping out of an incentive, do so carefully. If an incentive is designed to help get through that initial, early adapter, all those people, and it's a classic business cycle. It's followed a classic business trend, and it should be slowing down. It should be finding some kind of an equilibrium that'll carry forward and hopefully be great jobs for decades and decades. But even if we kept the incentive, I don't see 2017 having the same kind of growth rate. So what do you see if there were an appropriate step out? What would that appropriate step out be? Because there's other things we need to incentivize. There's other technologies that need to get into the market that are way farther back in that developmental S-curve than solar energy is at this point.
It's a great question, and thank you. First of all, I will say that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that falling price, the yellow line there, is actually utility and industrial scale solar, not necessarily residential. It is more costly to put solar on a home. It's not the same buying power that you have with a utility scale project. So that price point itself is a little different. However, it's a great question.
The general statement still remains.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Because 10 years ago I looked at it.
Right.
And it's just for me buying it as a regular individual, not through some volume purchasing that you could get, as a Utah-based company that does installs. It's a quarter. For me, from what it was 10 years, I can get solar right now. I'd have to install it myself. 85 cents, 90 cents a watt compared to what it was 10 years ago. So,
correct. So again, and I completely agree. It's a great question. And, in my opinion, I think that we can start to phase it out. The federal government is going to phase it out as of, I believe, 2022 completely. And I think it would be wise to sort of look at how theirs phases down and start to phase it down alongside that federal tax credit. I think it's just something to look at rather than a sharp 1,500 in 2018 that gives. Honestly, it's not the worst scenario to look at how to scale that back, going from 2,000 to 1,500. I would rather go from a little bit slower of a step down from 2,000 to 1,500 to 1,000 to 500. I think that in 3 years, that's actually really impactful right there. But I think the slower you step that back, I think you absolutely can. The question is just what's the right way, and I think we could get to that if we look at some of these numbers and have maybe the audit through the legislative body that would actually help do that. The big part, again, would just be that cap and setting a race to the top. And then I fear as you get a race to the top by having a $4 million cap, you will just get the wealthier Utahns that actually want to purchase those. Those are the ones would get it first, because they would push forward and have the finances to be able to do so. So that part is extremely troubling for me, the $4 million cap.
Well, Mr. Chair, I represent the Kearns community. Solar's going nuts in Kearns. Now, why we do consider ourselves the Budweiser kings and of, how does that commercial go, where I am wealthy, I am rich, I am the king, whatever that is.
It's totally past blue ribbon out there.
Thank you. But the financing element, I think the cost to the individual consumer is different because everybody finances it now. Yeah. It's not the same, because there's financing options that even 5 years ago didn't exist. Thanks to you guys, which has been
Absolutely.
Spectacular, and thank you for that. So,
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Evans. if you think it's appropriate to phase out this tax incentive at some point, why haven't you gotten together with the sponsor of this bill during the interim to figure that out? If you don't like the proposals, the specifics in this bill, I don't think you have anybody to blame but yourself. And if you're not willing to come to the table with ideas, but instead throwing up walls and barriers and trying to hedge and get around it, that's not going to fly very well. I see that the cost of installing solar systems in Utah has, well, I guess nationwide, and I assume Utah follows similar trends, has gone down 66% since 2010. And the whole point of a subsidy, right, is to incentivize people to invest in something that we want them to invest in that maybe the market forces haven't quite brought down to a reasonable level yet. And I don't know if we're at that reasonable level or not, but it certainly has come down. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to look at phasing out this tax incentive over a period of time. And I encourage you to engage in the conversation a little bit more in a more detailed fashion than you have.
If I may answer that, that's a little challenging, but I will say that with all due respect to Representative Peterson, we had 3 scheduled meetings with OED. I contacted him after the second meeting because I felt like it had not gone to his liking in terms of the discussion. The first meeting was set to set the table, if you will. This was per OED's agenda. The second table was to discuss the benefits that this tax credit has generated. What are some of the ways that we're not looking at this rather than just a strictly cost basis? And the third conversation was meant to be about solutions. I reached out. I expressed a concern about putting a cap on this, that I would like to talk to him. And again, with all due respect, he told me he did not want to come to the third meeting. He felt that it was not productive. I felt it was, because it wasn't just the aspect of this being an incentive challenge as well and a budget challenge, but there was an administrative challenge to the Office of Energy Development. And so that was one of the other angles that we had to take to make sure that this was reasonable for them to administer. And so it was, I extended. I would like to, again, and further it. It was just that challenge of I was not necessarily met with what I would say was the most open opportunity to have that discussion. And I guess the industry as a whole was represented to him as being very obstructionist, when there's actually a lot of really good small businesses in Utah. The vast majority of the 100 companies now that are in the solar industry are small businesses. They do want to make something work and are palatable. So again, it's a challenging conversation to be, for me to be addressed with that. But I would say that there has been a desire, and there has been extensions not only from myself to some degree, because certainly right after those meetings I did, and even before the third meeting, but even members of the industry have asked as well and not necessarily gotten back, I think, all the answers to the bill, at least in draft form as it was, to what they needed or wanted. So again, a hard question to answer, but I hope that helps a little.
So my understanding is, I'm just going to jump in.
Please.
My understanding is there was a change in the Office of Energy Development, right, in that administration at time.
Actually, it was well after.
Selfishly, Rocky Mountain Power stole away
Yes.
that whole issue, but that's a whole other different issue.
Yes, Jeff Barrett. It was actually about a month or so after, I believe, that these meetings were set to conclude. So after the third meeting, he was still there for the third meeting. He hosted that third meeting.
So I'm going to spare myself for just a moment. Representative Peterson, you had a comment.
Yeah, just to, I feel like I'm in the people's court now with, my side, his side.
Trust me, I feel like Judge Judy.
I agree completely, Representative.
Judge Wapner. The Office of Energy Development did host 3 meetings. They were about 2 hours apiece. First meeting was to lay out the problem and explain from the state's perspective what's happening, and OED also explained some of their administrative problems and headaches that they're experiencing with the volume of applications. The second meeting was to discuss data that the industry had about looking at numbers, right? What's the return on investment? And also taking a look at exploring some of the possible options to redesign the tax credit or explore different things that we could do to change the status quo. The meeting, the first hour of the meeting was focused very heavily on the administrative headaches that OED was experiencing. And at about an hour into the meeting, I piped in and said, hey, who came prepared to talk about making changes to the actual tax credit? And at that point, I was met with crickets, with the exception of one of my own constituents who said, hey, if you do anything, you got to do a phase out. And there were no further comments other than from the individual who asked me to hold the interim stakeholder meetings, who said, we don't want to talk about this issue. We'll talk to Representative Peterson some other time. And at that point, the discussion veered back into the administrative headache issue, and at that point I thought the cards were laid out, that I was not dealing with a group that was honestly wanting to deal with changing the credit. So I left the third meeting to them to meet with. I told them that I would be drafting the bill, and I did draft the bill and submitted it to them in September. And at that point, I received some emails from some constituents and some other local smaller businesses just to reach out about it, but never really got another didn't receive an invitation to have another meeting or to sit down and meaningfully talk about changes to the tax credit.
All right, now that we're done with couples therapy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love you, bro. I love you, bro. Yeah.
I think with that, we have one more comment or question for Mr. Evans, but this is now becoming a record-long public comment. Representative
I
Bramble.
was thinking the same.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on Senator Henderson's line of questioning, if I may.
That's not good for you, Mr. Evans.
No.
Mr. Evans, you keep referring to the Office of Energy Development. What do you perceive their role to be in the structure of government?
To foster a strong energy sector in our community?
It's the executive branch of government that has that office, isn't it?
Sure, yes.
And they carry out the policies of the legislative branch. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair.
Three separate but equal branches of government?
Yes.
And this is the legislative branch where we set the policies that they carry out, and we set the policies that they try to administer. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So my question is, how many different times have you brought forward any proposals relative to a phase-out or adjustments to this credit to the legislative branch of government if you don't like what has been proposed for the last 9 months?
In fairness, this was not necessarily for the last 9 months, this proposal. This has changed.
Let me rephrase the question, Mr. Chair. How many times in the last 9 months have you brought forward any proposals at all relative to this credit that would change it in any way?
We've actually discussed various times the option of running a bill ourselves to possibly phase this out in a more appropriate way, given the resistance that we felt. I do think we've had several discussions. We've actually reached out to members of the legislative body to better understand their feelings on this credit, to better understand the impact to education. And we do have several ideas. I mean, in those meetings, there was means testing thrown out as far as income levels. However, I think we've actually established that it does range as far as income levels go. There was the idea of a phase out. The cap was the hardest part because then you create that race to the top. And so our feeling is we could easily get to something, and I don't think it's very hard to even for us to draft something, but I think that would be an appropriate discussion for the entire legislative body. And this particular bill and the resistance that I felt, it was challenging to try to work past that cap.
Did you provide those proposals to Representative Peterson?
I have not to this point. I gladly can. I gladly
In 9
will.
months, you didn't feel it appropriate to give him any indication of where there might be common ground?
I did in terms of the phone calls that we had. So actually I would say that yes, because a phone call is a valid form of communication. I felt like we had a discussion on it. I felt that he felt very firmly that there should be a cap on this, and that cap was the hardest part to get past. But I think we can easily work to it. If nothing else, I know we have had great discussions with the Office of Energy Development in terms of that administrative assistance. So yes, that is part of the bill as well. So we have come with some solutions for fixing this credit. I think we can come with more. We have 2 months
Mr. Chair,
before the
if I
session.
may, we haven't seen any proposals in this meeting. You didn't have time to prepare for this meeting to bring those proposals forward?
It's not time, Senator. I
Okay.
apologize for that. We are, in fairness, there's lots of other issues facing the solar industry too right now. But yeah, I mean, I would gladly come and have that discussion. And I would gladly, if it would be helpful, we can provide those in writing.
Mr. Chair, quite often industry, when they don't like something, they stonewall, they
Really?
slow bake, they say, we will talk about this, but we will not allow talking about this or that. I support this proposal because I think if we pass this out, it will perhaps incentivize members of the industry to sit down with the sponsor and actually have some substantive discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bramble. Okay, Mr. Evans, thank you very much for your public comment. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you to the committee chair and to the committee. My name is Sophie Hayes. I'm the staff attorney for Utah Clean Energy. Utah Clean Energy is a state-based, nonpartisan, nonprofit, public interest organization that advocates for clean energy technologies. And I will be very brief this morning. Ryan Evans, who you've just spoken to, talked about the economic benefits of the renewable energy tax incentive. I think the big picture of which is that for the analysis that Utah Clean Energy performed, that for $20 million invested by the state in the tax incentive, it leverages over $300 million in economic development benefits in the state. In light of those benefits, it is Utah Clean Energy's position that we do need to take more time to examine this bill. And I know we've had a discussion about the last 9 months, and Utah Clean Energy has had conversations with Representative Peterson and is very grateful for his willingness to work with us. And we've had discussions with him about different options for amending the legislation as it is right now. So I wanted to bring up a couple new things for consideration. New, some of them you talked about this morning, including the legislative fiscal analysis, which identified over 170 tax exceptions and inducements currently on the books, 111 of which with unknown dollar values, and 59 of which with unknown dollar impacts, or rather 59 of which that lacked clearly defined purposes or goals. And so given this context, I think it's important that we are careful before we make any changes that are really quite dramatic to the renewable energy tax incentive. I'd also like to point out that this credit is set to be evaluated before November 30th, 2019, pursuant to the tax credit review amendments, which was adopted in the 2016 third special session. And so we really do have some time to evaluate this bill a bit more carefully. And as you've heard from Ryan, the solar industry does want to work with Representative Peterson, and Utah Clean Energy is very much wants to work with Representative Peterson on this bill. But currently, the bill lacks buy-in from the solar industry, and we think that's very important going forward. So given the significant economic benefits of this bill, we do think passing it out of committee right now is premature. So I will take any questions you may have, or you may be exhausted from them.
Well, I think Mr. Evans is more exhausted than anybody else. Okay, I don't see any questions, but I really appreciate your comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will bring it back to the committee for committee action. Representative Peterson, being a member of the committee,
Yes, I actually...
you can make an appropriate action if you'd like.
Yes, I'd make the motion that we pass this bill forward as a committee bill.
Okay, the motion before us is to pass income tax credit modifications, the 11/15/2016 draft, and make it a committee bill. That is the motion before us. Discussion to that motion. Representative Polson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I have some discomfort about passing this out as a committee bill. Basically, you know, in the past, most of these committee bills are non-controversial. They often don't go to another committee once the session starts. They often go straight to the floor. I think there's way too much controversy in this. I think to pass it out as a committee bill and have the possibility of it just, you know, appearing on the third reading calendar without another committee hearing is not wise because of the discussion it's engendered. So I won't be supporting it today.
Thank you, Representative Polson. Senator DeBackus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Lights.
I think this is a terrible bill. I think it's going completely in the wrong direction. I think that the thought of wanting to reduce the state's terrific growth in solar is a serious mistake. It will cost lives as we use more coal and we substitute that. This is a nascent industry in the state. It's going to cause jobs, and this may be maybe $20 million of the best money we spend for our children's future. And I would recommend that everybody vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Stevenson.
I just want to support the motion, but point out that today we've had a really interesting revelation that there are some members of the committee who are willing to give up some revenue that would otherwise go to the school fund in the name of economic growth and supporting jobs and prosperity for the families that these children come from. And there are others who would oppose that. Those who would oppose that are willing to give up $20 million from the school fund as long as the children's lungs are cleaner, but they would oppose the economic prosperity argument. It's really interesting what we're seeing here today, but I support the motion.
Thank you, Senator. It's like a Senate floor debate in here today. Representative Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've struggled with this one. And first, hopefully those of you, especially the ones who feel like they probably got taken to the woodshed a little bit in the committee, the solar industry has been great in Utah. It is a great industry in Utah. We need it in Utah. We need a lot more solar in Utah. I think the conversation comes around to if you pull all of this all the way back, and in my mind what I came to is when you find an industry that you really, really need, and we needed this, solar industry needed to be healthy and strong, and so we actually as a legislature went to schools and asked elementary school kids to help push this wagon of economic development and growth in this sector. And so in the back of my mind, we agreed. We went out and said, look, you guys are going to give up some money, you're going to give up some opportunity, there's going to be an impact to your elementary schools and your high schools and whatnot, but we really, really need this, and will you guys join in us helping push this forward? So the question is, at what point do we go back to those school kids and say, thank you for the help, the industry is doing great? If the industry really, if I was concerned for a second that solar would disappear or that without this it would go away. So I'm very, very sensitive because we can't have that. We need to continue to push this forward. Solar has become a tremendous part of our economy, and it needs to be a much bigger part of our economy. Question is, At what point do we tell the school kids, thanks for the help, we're good, the car's moving again, we appreciate the jump start because the battery was dead, but we're driving down the highway now, and we're still asking the kids to help push the car down the highway, even though the car started, it's running, it's very, very profitable. And at what point do we just say thanks to the school kids and you've done enough and we appreciate the help? And an incentive, I don't know, at this point, you know, if the industry wasn't working, if it wasn't helping, so I guess I'm concerned because it has to function, it's got to work, because there are some legitimate environmental and economic development issues that solar is an absolutely spectacular answer for. It's the right answer. But the kids are pushing the car at the moment, and are we done? Can we say done and thank you, and are we there? Do we need to maybe pull a few of them off? Do we need to phase it out? I don't know. I think we need to be careful with that, but I just worry that these kids have been pushing this thing for a while now, and maybe it's time to let them be finished. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We got some of the school kids here in the audience. Maybe we could ask them how long they want to push the car on the highway. Representative Ellison.
Thank you. One question for staff and then a comment in general. A comment was made earlier that interim committees maybe not be the appropriate place to pass legislation. They are obviously bicameral committees. I believe, if I'm up to date on our legislative rules, there's no guarantee that if a bill passes out of interim committee as a committee bill, that it goes straight to the floor. I believe that's the prerogative of the Bipartisan Rules Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. My next comment is I've heard ad nauseum comments about a $14 million one-time appropriation, it's not even $14 million, for a potential lawsuit that could benefit public school children if federal lands were returned to Utah. That was one time. If I understand this right, this is at least $20 million ongoing and growing. Is that correct?
20 million and growing, that's correct.
Okay, I'm going to spare some of the conversations I've heard about how much $14 million could be used in public schools. I will tell you, I met with a group of teachers this week that said that for the first time in their history, they've been put on a paper budget. And they only have so much paper, and now the teachers are hoarding the paper because they're going to run out before the end of the year. 20 million buys a lot of paper. And so I think in light of the arguments made for the falling prices and the role of government to phase out, I think our school children could use this money. So I stand in strong support of this bill.
Okay. I think everyone knows where they're at on the bill. I'm going to call on one more light, Senator Bramble.
Thank you. I have a recommendation on the motion. It could be a substitute motion or just a friendly amendment, and that is that in the motion that we request that this go to a standing committee in either the House or the Senate, predicated on who the chair assigns the sponsorship of the bill to, because not only is it not a given that it goes to the third reading calendar in the House, it's not a given that it goes straight to the board in the Senate, and you don't like that. Okay? Well, then I'll not make it.
Thank you. Okay, with that, the motion appropriately before us is to pass out with a committee recommendation. I apologize, I forgot to go back to the bill sponsor for summation. If you could go give us a quick summation, that'd be great.
Yeah, I just thank the committee for the time. It's been a great discussion, and I think we've pretty much all spoken our minds.
All right, back to the maker of the motion. The maker of the motion was originally, if I remember right, Senator Bramble?
Nope.
Apologize, and I've lost track with our discussion.
I made the motion.
It was Representative Peterson, thank you. All right, and I assume he's waiving his summation.
I'll waive my motion summation.
All right, the recommendation before us is to pass with a recommendation for general session, to pass it as a committee bill, and for recommendation for general session, income tax credit modifications, 11-15-16 draft. We will, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no and raise your hands. Okay, the following are no votes: Senator DeBackus, Representative Spendlove, Representative Briscoe, Representative Polson, and Senator Davis. And with that, it passes as a committee bill in both the House and the Senate. Thank you very much, Representative Peterson.